Hi and welcome to this video in the QPSMR Companion CATI Up and Running series. And in this video we're focusing on setting quotas and managing quotas that you want for your sample, from your sample in a QPSMR CATI project. So the first thing you need to decide is what you want to go into your quotas, or how you want your quotas to be made up. And we're going to look at two practical examples here, quite simple ones, but nonetheless practical. So I'm going to start, first of all, using these two questions that actually come from our sample file. They need them done, but they do in this particular occasion. So I'm going to go to the member question. Now, it has to be a single coded question, so we want to set this particular question as a quota question and use it for quotas. If we don't check that box, we won't be able to use it for quotas. And I want to use event. Again, it must be a single response question, so we're going to double click on that. And settings, and set that as a quota entry as well. And we're going to save that work so that we've got it saved. Now we can use member and event as questions that we want to use to check that they fit within the quotas that we're trying to achieve across all our interviews. So how do we go about that? Well, we go to the CATI menu up here and we go to the create a quota file. So we click on that and we use the default name, which is project action quota.csv. And you can see here that it knows which questions I've set. There's those yes/no answers to the member question, the yes/no answers to the event question. And it tells us that we've got nothing set at all yet. We haven't got any targets that we want to get to. We haven't completed anything at all. So we need to start setting this up, or a supervisor would need to start setting this up. An interviewer wouldn't have access to this part of the program. This is just for the supervisor. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the yes. I'm going to click wanted, and I'm going to click on the tens here. So let's say I want 50 people who said yes to the member question, but for the non-member question I just want 10, so I've got 50. Let's do 20. There we go. And then for the event question I want 40 people. Let's do a 35-35 here. Let's split it 50-50. 35 that did attend the event and 35 that didn't attend the event. So that's my, if you like, targets for my quotas. 50 people who are members, 20 who are non-members, and 35 that attended the event and 35 that didn't. So a total of 70 respondents I'm trying to get here, and the split in those ways between those two questions. Now this will mean that the supervisor at any point in the process can see what's in progress. They can see how many interviews are finished, how many are in progress. They can check to look at their sample file. We have a separate video on handling the sample or managing the sample file. So they can check to see whether they've got enough respondents in there to hit their quotas that they're trying to achieve, or whether they need to actually add some more sample. But let's close that and save, and we're ready now to, if we wish to look at that quota file, we can just view it at any time we want to. Click on it again, and there, and sure enough, we can see what's going on. Now we can see these figures changing in the next video in the series, which actually takes you through a tele-interviewer, where we can actually then see a completed interview and these numbers changing by one to accommodate the fact that we've got one already and that we need one less, and so on. So that's a very quick introduction to how you use quota files. It's a supervisor function that the supervisor can view at any time. Now, sometimes your quotas you want are what we call interlocking cells. So here we've got two independent questions, a yes/no question for members and a yes/no, and we've made both of these add to 70, the target of respondents that we want. But sometimes you want to make your quota come from more than one question, or perhaps by grouping something together into some ranges. whatever it might be. So I'm going to take off those settings now, uncheck that, same for event, go to my settings, uncheck the quota, and this time I want to do a little matrix. I want to set 4 quotas again, but they're interlocking, so I want the members within the event, or attendees, non-attendees, within members and non-members. So still 4 categories, but this time they're interlocking. So to do that, I would need to build a variable. So I'm going to insert a variable in here. I'm going to call it member underscore event. It must be single, remember. And now I've made it single, I can make it a quota entry. So member within event. Type correctly there, good. And it's going to be a matrix of those 2 questions. Now I could sit and type in the 4 combinations, member 1, event 1, member 1, event 2, member 2, event 1, and member 2, event 2. But we have a quick tool for that. Add a response matrix, pick the first variable, which is member. I want both the codes, yes and no, of course. Same again for event. I want both codes again. Click OK to finish. It's going to generate 4 cells, and of course if that was, I could now do that within region if I wanted to. If I had 6 regions, so I could have 24 cells if I did 2 by 2 by 6, but I've just got 2 by 2, which is 4. Click OK, and it's made that variable for me called member event. I save it, and now if I go back to my quota file, so I can create a quota file, I'm going to replace the previous one, and you can see now what I've got is people who say yes and yes, no, or yes with no, no and yes, and no and no. So this time I want my wanted. I still want a target of 70 people, but perhaps I want 20 of them here, 20 of them here, 10 here, and I managed to make it under add, so another 10 there, and 20 here. So that will give me my sample of 70 again, but this time it's from Interlocking Cells. It's people who said yes at member, and then yes for event, and yes at member, and no for event, no at member, and yes for event, and no, and that will get my 70 quota. And if I fill those quotas, we can then stop interviewing because we filled those quotas. And again, the supervisor can see how that's performing all the way through the process, why people are working and in real time. So that completes this video on handling quotas in QPSMR Companion CATI. If you want to see more, watch the video where we actually put in some records and you can see those quotas changing as the survey progresses. Thanks for joining me.